All right, Danielle, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Leanne. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, I am so excited to have this conversation. I do want to put a trigger warning out now. We are going to be talking about domestic violence, but this episode is a little bit of a different perspective, which is why I really wanted you to come on. You are not a survivor per se directly of domestic violence, like you being in a physically abusive relationship, but you have experience as being someone who has been affected secondhand from domestic violence. So family, loved ones, things like that. I've had a lot of survivors come on my show and share their story, but I have not had the point of view of yours as what it's like to deal with domestic violence as someone who you love or you lost, unfortunately. And for you, your story is very profound. It's very powerful that we're going to get into it. But I really just appreciate you coming on and sharing a point of view that's really not talked about a lot, if you really think about it. We talk about us being the victims of actually dealing with the abuse, but I don't really hear a lot of conversation in regards to the people on the outside looking in. So that's where you come in. So thank you so much for being a voice for the voiceless. You know how I do on this podcast. We're having uncomfortable conversations. And I really just do appreciate you standing up and speaking up and sharing your testimony with my audience.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Anytime I have the opportunity to share wisdom, education, and of course my niece's story, I'm all for it. And then to give some encouragement to people to let people know they don't have to sit in this type of stuff alone.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why I start off with the heavy first, and then the conversation transitions over to the more motivational, uplifting, and positive. Because when it comes to abuse in general, and especially domestic violence, it's a very taboo subject that we don't talk about. It's something that we suffer in silence around. And it's in us sharing our stories that we're able to let other people know you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't need to feel so alone and isolated. So let's get into it. But before we even jump headfirst into your own story, for anyone who's meeting you for the first time, I would love for you to introduce yourself, whatever you want to share with my audience.
My name's Danielle. Everybody calls me Danny. I am a nonprofit founder, educator by trade. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I do all the things. But where my passion lies is in the realm of domestic violence. Like I said, I'm a nonprofit founder. My organization does help women and men and non-binary people, anyone experiencing domestic violence. So our goal is to just make sure that we are there to support them and provide those services that they're not able to receive elsewhere.
Yes, and it's called Our Three Memorial Foundation. We're going to link it in the show notes for anyone who wants to learn more. Where are you based out of, if you don't mind sharing?
So we're based out of Jackson, Mississippi. We serve the entire state of Mississippi, and some of our services are provided nationwide, like our toiletries and things like that. So
That is amazing that you have been able to turn such a painful part of your life into really helping others who have gone through what you have experienced with your family. So before we talk about that, I always have every guest that comes on talk about their childhood growing up. And since we are focusing this conversation around DV, domestic violence, I would love for you to talk about what did life look like for you as a kid, and was DV something that you saw in your home growing up? Was that something that you dealt with on a regular basis?
not until I got into the work that I do did I even realize I did experience domestic violence as a child. In my eyes, it was mom and daddy had a fight. Although my father was the aggressor, still in my eyes, my mom and daddy just had a fight. So I was the baby of three girls. I was the epitome of a baby. Like my parents doted on me. They gave us everything we wanted. We grew up in a middle class household, first house on the block to have a computer, all that jazz. So on the outside looking in, like we are the perfect lower middle class family growing up in Illinois. And I was daddy's little girl, did everything with my daddy, went hunting, went fishing, all that kind of. If my daddy was doing it, I was going. And long story short, because I know we have limited time, but things that since I've been in therapy that I now realize contributed to me even going into therapy in the first place. When I was younger, my father and I were on one of our infamous road trips going to the South because both of my parents are from the South. And he was like, if you had a sister that was younger than you, would you want to know? Now, mind you, I said younger than me. My parents were married before I was born. So there's that. So, of course, me being a young child, it's my daddy. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I meet this girl. We have a great time. My dad picks her up. And when we get back, I'm just talking to my mom just about my trip. And I was like, Mom, did you know I have a sister? My mom had no clue. So I just remember there being this huge fight. And I remember sitting outside on the porch, boohoo crying, thinking that it was my fault. What did I do wrong? Nobody ever talked to me. Nobody's ever said, well, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. This is adult stuff. So I carried that for years. It played a part in like my overachieving, always wanted to never mess up that big again, always thinking I had to be perfect. Even when I went off to school and got pregnant, like I hid my pregnancy for a while because I'm like, oh my God, they are going to be so disappointed. Just things that I should not have had to go through, but I did. It was part of my life, part of my story. So that was one big fight I remember. And then I remember after we moved down south, I remember, I don't to this day, because my mom is one of those people who doesn't really talk about her feelings.
I mean, I think that's every household of people of color because I'm a Puerto Rican descent and it's the same way in my home growing up. Talking about your feelings, talking about mental health. If our parents got in a fight, it's behind closed doors. We don't know nothing about it. So I understand you completely.
Yeah, so to this day, I don't know what it was about. I remember getting ready for church. I was in my bedroom, my middle sister was in her room, and we just hear doom, 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 doom. And we're like, what in the world is going on? We run in. My mom is in the tub, and my father is hitting her, and we don't have a clue what's going on, what it's about. So that was another instance. Again, I'm just thinking family fight. So fast forward to me going to college and having my child, and I got into a not abusive relationship. And the reason I say that it was not abusive is because it just wasn't a good relationship. I'll say that because I'm very cautious to call things abusive that are not abuse. There wasn't a repeated pattern. It just wasn't a good relationship. So, but yeah, that was my childhood. Great childhood, I thought, growing up until I got older and really understood what was really going on in my household.
I appreciate the transparency in talking about that because that is one of the questions I'm going to ask you later on in regards to how do we speak to children who have dealt with domestic violence and how that really takes a toll on them mentally, emotionally, in relationships, all these things. And I say that on my podcast all the time, like the shit that we go through in our childhood, we really don't realize how much it affects us until we start on our personal development journey, going to therapy, talking out our feelings. And we're like, damn, my parents really fucked me up.
Man, listen.
I love them to death, but god damn.
Damn, exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yes. So
100%.
yeah, and it's in having these conversations where we feel seen and heard and understood. So I appreciate you for talking about that. We're going to talk about something that happened pretty recently. It was back in 2019, I believe, that you unfortunately tragically lost your niece to domestic violence. So I would love for you to share again, however open and honest you're willing to go, but just tell us what happened back then, and then we'll get into the work that came from that very tragic loss in your family.
So, February 27, 2019, I'm in the bed knocked out and I get a phone call. And I look over, it's my mom, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I answer, and she's screaming, crying. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. And she said, he killed Jackie and the kids. And I'm, of course, jump up and I'm like, wait, what are you? So my mom she can be a little, in her age, can be a little hysterical. So I'm like, maybe they got into it. Maybe it's something else. So, like, immediately denial. And so then I called my sister, Jackie's mom, and she confirmed that Jackie and both of her children were deceased. The next 2 days, I'm gonna be honest, were a blur. I do know I got up that morning, I went to work, and my boss was like, why are you here? And I was like, I can't sit at home. I don't know. So I left work and got on a flight and flew to Illinois. It was then when I got to Illinois that I was able to get specifics from not only my sister, but also from Jackie's murderer's sister. So, according to investigation, sisters, family, and neighbors, what happened that night was he called into work and told them that he wasn't coming in. And he waited for her to get home. He waited for her to get undressed and get in her bedclothes, and he attacked her. Her neighbors said that she heard screaming, but in that community, you let them people handle that. You don't call the police. So nobody called the police. Specifically, she said it felt like she was screaming bloody murder. And that's exactly what happened. So he beat her to a pulp at some point, because the fight itself, we found evidence that it happened downstairs. But at some point, she got loose and she was headed up the steps. We don't know if she was going to get her phone or if she was trying to get to the kids. We don't know, of course. But long story short, he ended up pulling out a firearm and shooting her twice in the back and left her on the steps. From there, he called his sister and told his sister that he had choked Jackie and punched her out. But Jackie at this point is laying on the steps, bleeding out. And his sister was just like, well, if that's what you did, you can come here and stay for the night. But if she called the police, you just have to deal with it. She said when he heard the words police, it's like he totally flipped and he started telling her, y'all can't take care of my kids. I can't go to jail and all this stuff. So as his sister's on the phone with him, she hears him say, come here, Fluff. That was the 1-year-old, Giovanni. Come here, Fluff. Hey, baby. And she hears a gunshot. And she immediately starts screaming and asks him, what did you do? And she said the whole time he's got the phone, but he is not answering her. So she lives down the street, shops in her car, rushes over there. She said by the time she made it there, she had heard him wake Gianna up and also shoot her. He waited until she got there, got out of her car, and broke into the house to meet her at the top of the stairs. When she saw Jackie's body, she said she looked up to him. He put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. When you hear that, you're like, what happened? Because we knew they were separating. The last that we had actually spoken about it was that weekend prior, and Jackie, initially, she was going to move out. She had told him, well, I know you don't really have anywhere to go. You can keep the house. I'll go and move with my dad. And he came in that Saturday and told her, you don't have to leave. I'll leave. You don't have to move. I'll move. And he started packing boxes. Well, as we were cleaning up the house and after everything happened, we had to pack all of her things up. We found that those boxes that he packed were full of cleaning supplies. So in our minds, of course, this is all speculation. This part is speculation. In our minds, his initial plan was to get away with it. When we were cleaning up, we also found the outline, the policeman outline when you go to the gun range. He had been to the gun range the week prior. We found he had a safe and all kinds of stuff. We found he had medication that he was not taking for mental illness. We don't even know if she knew that. We knew he was controlling, like when we would go on family vacations, he wouldn't be able to go and he would like call and make her sit on the phone the entire time. Like, she's with us. What's going to happen? So we knew he was controlling, but we never knew, and still to this day don't know, if he had ever gotten physically violent before. I do know he was verbally abusive. I can remember one instance where she sent a video where he was calling her out of her name in the background. And my middle sister was like, Jackie, don't ever send me anything like that again, because I can't guarantee that I'm going to be kind to him. Basically, like, now I know that probably wasn't the best response. Again, we didn't know. We grew up in a household where it's what people do. But now in the field that I am now, that was a boom, boom, boom warning sign, like ding dings going off. But yeah, that's what happened to Jackie. So we, of course, buried her and her children together, and took us some time to even get to a place to be able to speak about it, because of course we knew about this before we even buried them. And a lot of people speculated, a lot of people get on social media, and I think there was one person that got on social media and said something about he must have caught her cheating. And it was like, you clearly don't know these people, because they both stayed to themselves. Like, neither one of them, it was just, he was just a mean, controlling person who lost control and realized that his control was being taken away and couldn't stomach it.
I need to decompress before we move on, because that was very, very intense. And I appreciate you for going as deep as you did, because you didn't have to. Like I said before we started recording, it's not really important to know exactly what happened. It's more important that we are able to let the audience know this is real life. this is what happens, which is why I appreciate you for going that deep. Because, when you talked about the whole social media thing, something popped into my head that I see a lot. The blogs like the Shade Room and Baller Alert and all these things, every once in a while you'll see a celebrity who's locked up for a DV, or there's this, that, and the third, right? And when I scroll in the comments, because anytime I see the word domestic violence, I need to know about it. I go in the comments and there's so many ignorant comments of like, well, why did she stay? What does she do? Why don't she just leave? This is the fucking reason
Exactly.
why we don't leave.
Because it's the most dangerous moment. And I don't think people get that. I mean, I know they've heard it, but I don't think they get it. When you have an abusive person who has controlled you for years, Jackie and that boy were together for 13 years. He had been controlling her since she was in high school. And now she's going to finally take her control away? Absolutely not. I mean, and that's why when he realized he was losing control, he could not stomach that. And people don't understand, when you have a controlling person and you're taking away the one thing they feel like they have control over, they will stop at nothing to keep it. It's been in the headlines time after time after time after time. And I don't know what it's going to take for people to fucking understand that.
It's always until it's too late, until we reach the point of your niece no longer being here that, oh, now we got to talk about it. Now change needs to be made. No, the fucking change needs to be made when it's happening. That's when the conversation needs to be happening.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I know you get it. And this is why I really wanted you on the podcast, because not only because your story is so profound and powerful, but because of what you've been able to turn it into. But I know it's not easy, especially being someone that has dealt with secondhand effects of domestic violence. And I'm sure there's a lot of emotions that came up for you before getting to this point, lifelong healing journey. And there's been a lot of emotional and psychological toll that it takes on secondhand survivors. So I would love for you to share your point of view of how that was for you in the beginning, and what were some ways that you were able to really start turning that around, those feelings of like shame, guilt, all of those things.
Yeah, you said it right there. Guilt. Guilt was probably outside of grief, of course, guilt was probably the number one emotion that I felt. I felt so guilty. Like, I felt like I should have been there. I felt like I should have paid attention more. I remember the summer before we went on our annual family vacation, Jackie and I were just talking, and she was like, T, I think I might move to Mississippi. And I was like, well, come on. And it was like a ha moment. And now looking back, I'm like, was that her reaching out then? Was that her saying, I got to get away from this man? I don't know. And I carried that honestly a little bit still now, but for those first probably 2 years, I carried that as this big weight on my shoulder. Like, why did I not see? I knew he was controlling. I knew that he was verbally abusive. How could I not see that it would have gotten to this point? Guilt was definitely the number one. The other one was just confusion. What the hell? I can't tell you how many times, like, I questioned everybody. I questioned God. I questioned the programs there in the state of Illinois. I questioned my own sister, her mom. Like, how could you not have known? You're right around the corner. I questioned her dad. Why did that motherfucker kill himself? Why couldn't we put our hands on him? And I'm sorry if I'm showing my Midwest side, but like,
Listen, I get it. I'm from Jersey, so I get it.
yeah, like all of that. Like, no, he should have stood here, faced the music, and he probably, I hate to say it, but it would have been a whole nother type of ball game. Just anger that we didn't get to actually see justice, whether it was in the courts or street justice or whatever. We just never got to see it. All those emotions kind of bottled up together, and didn't know if I was coming or going some days. So, how did I get to where I am now, where I can talk about it without shedding a tear, and I can work with people just like her on a day-to-day basis? I'm going to tell you the meat and potatoes, and I'm going to tell you the like number one top. So, of course, I sought professional help. That was like my first and foremost. I went to therapy. I had been in therapy before. I went back to therapy because after the initial shock, grief, anger, confusion, I started dealing with depression and anxiety, something horrible. I'm talking about I didn't want to go out around people. I would sit in the house for days on end and just cry. And the day that I knew, like, okay, you got to do something, girl, I thought I was having a legit heart attack. That's how bad my anxiety had gotten. So I went back to therapy. In therapy, I was allowed to express my emotions. So, of course, you lean on your family, but I had to remember they're going through it too. They're feeling the same thing. At this point, we just trading emotions day in and day out. There's not really being any help. So, therapy was a huge help because I got to express my emotions. I got to learn that I had to release that guilt. And I also was able to get support from of course, my husband was amazing. And then I also learned to just allow myself to have those feelings. Like, give myself grace. Like, because some days I would be so angry, and then I would be like, oh, God doesn't want me to be angry because I do come from a religious family. And, it's like, oh, God doesn't want you to be angry. Trust Him. And that's all great. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that. But at the same time,
You're a human being.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, look, I'm mad, like real, real mad. So,
Mhm.
and then also just learn to lean into what can I do to keep their legacy alive? What can I do to keep other people from experiencing what our family experienced? And at the top of that was my faith. I'll be honest. At the top of that was my faith. God knows if He would come down here and sit on my shoulder right now, He'll tell you, this girl question me day in and day out. I think I might have said a few cuss words in my prayers, God. Like, I was angry. But at the end of the day, my faith kept me rooted enough to be able to push and keep going.
That's so beautiful. And honestly, that's the perfect segue to the next part that I want to talk about, which is your foundation that you started in the name of your niece and her two children. It's called, again, Our Three Memorial Foundation. So you talked about the purpose behind it. It's in their memory. Talk about what that journey looked like for you to create a nonprofit, and if there were any roadblocks that came up along the way and how you navigated through for it to be where it is today.
Absolutely. Ooh, girl, the roadblocks are still coming. So yeah. So when I set out to like do something in Jackie's honor, a organization was not what I was thinking. I was going to volunteer at these organizations in my area and be that voice there and that help there. But as I started volunteering, I realized that while women of color make up the majority of domestic violence instances in this state, they are the least likely to seek services. And as I'm going through this, I started to realize why. I hate saying this because it puts a negative light on DV organizations, but women of color are not always treated the same when they call into these organizations. They don't get the same treatment, they don't get the same services, though they should. It's unfortunate that they don't. I have seen organizations that are state funded assume that a woman of color calling in for assistance with domestic violence issues and trying to find, they're assuming that, oh, she must be on drugs, or I bet you she's on this, or she probably has this, or she's going to go right back. The turning point for me was realizing that not only that was happening, but some services that, like immediate services that survivors need, aren't even a thing. Like, they're not even offered, like things like a gas card to get back and forth to work when this man has been financially abusing me for years. I don't have money, and I come here and you tell me you can't give me gas to go back to forth to work. I'm going to lose my job. I might as well go back to him. I had a survivor tell me that, and literally like was just telling me, she was like, I might as well just go back. And at this time I was still volunteering. I took $50 out of my pocket. And I was like, here, you're not going back. We're going to go put gas in this car. If I got to buy you groceries, whatever it takes, you're not going back. And she did not go back. So
Yes.
I was like, yeah, she didn't go back. So that's when I was like, okay, why doesn't anybody provide these services? So I start calling other places. Everybody that does DV here, they offer shelter, which is of course, is very important, but they don't offer things like, okay, I left in the middle of the night. I need a new ID. $15 for an ID. They don't offer that. Most of them do offer toiletries, but just those, and they offer safety planning, but just those like immediate needs were not being met, like crisis transportation. Like, I'm here with this man in Mississippi, but my family's in Illinois. I need to get back to them. They couldn't even get $100 bus ticket. So I was like, okay, so what I'm gonna do? I was like, well, I'm just gonna start trying to figure it out. And I was like, okay, I could get some donations if I'm a nonprofit. So that's how I started R3. And first roadblock was funding.
Hmm.
Just
When
get
did
like
you start it? What year did it open?
I started February 2020, you guys, and
Oh, wow.
the pandemic hit March. So it was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What did I get myself into? So I started doing like virtual fundraisers, and I was getting like $150 here, $400 there, but it wasn't enough to keep the need going, because honestly, I would say the last 3 years have been extremely busy, but I would say those first 2 years were busier than last year because of the pandemic. Like, it was just an influx in domestic violence situations. And so I was like, I prayed one night. I was like, God, if this is really what I'm supposed to be doing, you have to show me, because I mean, it's getting towards the end of the year and your girl about to throw in the towel. I don't think I was supposed to do this. It was crazy because like all the paperwork that people talk about when starting a nonprofit, it was so simple for me. So now looking back, I know that it was because this is what I was supposed to be doing. That was one week. Like the next week, I saw an application for a grant through Allstate Foundation. And I was like, I'm gonna apply. We ain't even finished a fiscal year, but I'm gonna apply and we're gonna see if we get it. And we got it. So
Yes, that's God.
that's God. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. We've been rocking and rolling ever since. Like, funding is still an issue because we are small. And I have this thing where I won't accept state funded grants because they dictate who you can and can't help, like demographic. And that's just not okay with me. A survivor is a survivor. So that's the big overhead thing for me, is like, I will never take a state grant as long as they're going to tell me who I can and can't help.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much. And I'm definitely, again, we're going to link all of your info in the show notes so people can learn more, learn ways to work with you or donate. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And just thank you so much for being able to turn such an ugly situation that happened into really honoring your family and letting them know that I'm going to keep your memory alive and I'm going to help other people in the process. That's literally what this podcast is about. Watch us thrive. So I appreciate you so much for that. Okay, so now I want to ask you a couple of questions because you are an expert in your experiences and in what you do. So the first thing I want to ask you, what are your thoughts around complete separation from abusers? Like we said before, we know the most dangerous time for anyone to be in an abusive relationship is when they decide to leave. So what would you say are some challenges that survivors face during that time when they do decide to leave? And what are some ways that they can navigate leaving in a safe way?
Let's go with challenges first. Number one is, I know people are like, oh, they're just asking for money. But no, seriously, the number one challenge people face is going to be that financial strain. And it's for multiple reasons. Some reasons could be because they were being financially abused. And then even those that are not financially abused still see a financial strain because they're going from a two-income household to one. And they've got all of these new expenses. They've got to pay for their own transportation. They've got to pay for food. If they've got children, they got to cover daycare on their own. They got to provide all their own clothing. And so financial strain is definitely number one. Number two, breaking that emotional attachment, y'all, is so hard. I know a lot of people are like, well, I wouldn't, or I could never.
It couldn't be me.
Yeah, like, no. When you are in love with someone, even when they hurt you, it is so hard to break yourself from seeing the good times, because you got to think about it. You fell in love with this person. They weren't always that person to you. They turned into that person. They slowly but surely started to show their true colors. So that emotional stress that comes from trying to separate and learn how to not be dependent is another huge issue. Also, safety planning, and that's going to help me segue into how to get out. Safety planning becomes a huge issue for survivors because a lot of survivors are dealing with guilt, They're dealing with shame. They don't want people to know. And a part of a safety plan is to have a support system that you can get to that can navigate. You kind of trickle through this line of support. You don't want anybody to know. How can you create a safety plan?
Exactly. Nobody knew what I was going through until he almost killed me.
Seriously. And people don't understand, like, there is a huge stigma attached to domestic violence. Like, it has to be bad before people be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But you can go and tell somebody, girl, he cussed me out today. People gonna look at you like, why are you telling me? That is not okay. It's
Yes.
just not okay. So definitely safety planning. I can't stress that enough. I know it's cliche to have this written plan, but I promise you they work because you're not working off of emotion when you leave. That's number one. Number two is having a strong support system outside of that plan, not just the people who are going to help you navigate, but those people who revalidate you and remind you that you don't deserve what you're going through and that you can get through this. Self esteem is broken in domestic violence situations. Survivors need to be reassured all the time that they can do this. They've got support. You've got their back. Everybody got their back. They need that.
I feel like this conversation is flowing so beautifully because this perfectly segues to the next part that I want to talk about. Thank you, God, and thank to you that it was meant to be for us to sit down and have this conversation. So you talked about the support system and how important that is. What are some things that advocates, loved ones, support system, what should we not say to someone who is experiencing DV, especially if it's in that moment where they're kind of teeter-tottering back and forth and leaving, that hesitation? So what are some things that we should not say, and what are some alternatives that we should say to a survivor during that time frame?
Number one on my list, don't ask a survivor, why don't you just leave? Listen, the fact that they are considering and they're even opening up to you, saying those little words will shut them down so quick because now they feel judged. Do not do that. Don't say things like, oh, that don't even seem like him. I ain't never even seen him raise his voice. Who gives a shit what you saw? She or he is telling you what they did to them.
It's like you're invalidating everything that they're saying and feeling.
Absolutely. And that's not okay. That's not okay. Another one I hear a lot is a big one. Well, what you do? What did you do to him? You must have cussed him out, or you must have been cheating. I don't give a damn what she did. I don't care what that person did. It is not okay for anyone to physically put their hands on anybody else, let alone somebody you're supposed to care about. So instead of all your judgment, the first thing I would say is just offer a listening ear. You don't have to say anything. Listen attentively. Let them know that you're there. You don't have to say a word. Ask them how can I support you, sis? What you need from me? How can I help you get through this? Another big one, and it sounds cliche, but again, I promise you it holds so much weight to a survivor. I believe you. I 100% believe you. What do you want to do? How can I help you? How can I support you? What do you need from me to get through this? Like, do you need food? You need money? I know everybody is like, you need money, but when we say money, I'm not saying give people $1,000 for rent. Some people might need $45 for a bus ticket to the next town. Like, we spend that on coffee in a week. Life is way more important than coffee. And like I said, just listen without judgment, revalidate, remind them that they didn't deserve it. Those types of things are the things you should be saying. Keep your opinions out of it and just remind people that you are there for them.
I appreciate that so much. It really does make me think back to my experience of what I went through when I first told someone what was happening. I ran to my best friend's apartment. It was crazy the night. Every time I think about it, I'm like, I can't believe I survived what I went through. And I'm so grateful for that. But it was because I spoke up and I said something that I was able to like really start my healing. And there was no judgment. There was no questioning. There was no what happened. It was just like, yo, I'm there for you. Whatever you need, I am there. And it's because one of my best friends, shout out to Giovanna, it was because of her that I called 911. It was because of her that now he's in prison for what he did to me. So it's like, it's just important to have those people in your life. And you probably don't even know how supportive the people in your life can be until you speak up and you say, I'm not okay. I need help. And I love that you said sometimes it's okay for you to just shut the fuck up and not say anything and let me cry, let me scream, let me complain, let me do all these things. Just knowing that someone is there and they actually care, that speaks volumes without you having to say one word.
Yep, you don't have to say anything. Just be present. Let that person know that you are there. That's it.
This conversation is going to be so powerful for so many people out there who are suffering in silence right now. So if you got to play it back, send it to a friend, send it to a family member. There are so many gems in here, but we're not done yet. There's still a few things more that I want to ask you. What would you say if there aren't really clear cut signs of abuse? We talked about a whole bunch of different types of abuse: verbal, financial, emotional. What would you say when it comes to struggling with those negative feelings that come up, like we talked about before, anger, shame, guilt? What would you tell someone who's struggling with those negative emotions that come with the grieving process? It's like you said before, I had no idea. I didn't see the signs. So, what would you tell someone who's struggling with that?
If I was talking to that person, I would first tell them that I know it's heavy. I know it's an unbearable weight, but it is not yours to carry. That is something that I had to learn. Feel all the feelings, sit in all the emotions, give yourself grace, and know that no matter what, if you feel like you miss signs, that's okay that you feel that way. That's a normal feeling. If you feel like you could have done more, it's okay that you feel that way. And it's a normal feeling. But at the end of the day, remember that it's not your weight to carry and that you did not do that to your loved one. The perpetrator did. That is something that it took me a while to learn that although, yes, I could have and I wish I would have and all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, at the end of the day, Brandon Lee killed Jacqueline, Giovanni, and Fluff. Brandon Lee killed them. At the end of the day, that's his weight. That is not ours.
Oh, that's powerful. And that's definitely having the growth mindset of being able to turn that around, right? Okay, so we talked about it a little bit before, the impact of DV that it can have on children who are witnesses or even experience the abuse themselves. What would you say are ways that we can support children and even in breaking the cycle of violence in future generations? What can we do?
Number one, education, education, education. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. I cannot stress that enough. We do not talk to our youth about domestic violence. You think about the number of young girls, the couple that everybody like just thinks is amazing, and all they do is abuse each other.
Oh, are you talking about Krishan and Blueface?
Yeah, these kids idolize those fools. And
Girl.
all they do is abuse each other because nobody is talking to these kids about how unhealthy that shit is. That is number one when it comes to breaking the cycle. But when it comes to a child who has already experienced domestic violence, as a child who went through it and didn't realize it until they got older, talk to your kids when you know you've exposed them to domestic violence. If you got to talk to them by yourself, away from the other parent, whatever, talk to your kids. Let them know that mommy and daddy, or mommy and boyfriend, daddy and girlfriend, whoever, have things that adults are dealing with and adults need to work out, and it is not okay for either one of us to touch the other. Remind them that nothing that these adults do is their fault. Validate them, ask them how they're feeling, acknowledge that they are fucking scared. I can't stress that enough because we act like kids are just little objects that we can put on a shelf, and no matter what the hell they see you, they hear you, they hear how you talk to him, they hear how he talks to you. Remind children that those conversations are not okay and it's not healthy. And I'll never forget that after everything happened with my niece, a friend of mine called me. A lot of people called me, but this particular friend called me to tell me that she was experiencing both abuse and violence. And we talked for a long time and she told me she was going to get out of it. And she did eventually. It took her a while, but she did. But she was telling me that the reason she knew she had to get out of it is because she was, after they would fight, she would talk to her children. I think at the time her daughter was 9 or 10, but she was talking to her daughter and she said, "You don't ever let a man treat you any kind of way." And her daughter said to her, "Well, why do you let him do it to you?" That's when she realized, like, I got to go. I got to go. So talk to your children, talk to your kids.
I think us as adults, we tend to think, especially when they're younger, like, oh, they're not going to remember it. But Kids are like fucking sponges. It's so cliche, but it's true. My daughter will tell me things that she remembered like 5, 6 years old. And I'm like, how the fuck do you still remember that? It's crazy to me. So I think it's so, so important. And I'm just going to double down on what you said. Talking to your children is so important. I remember for me, when I came back home, because I was living in Florida, now I'm back home with my family. My daughter was living here. Thankfully, she wasn't around when the abuse happened, but we sat down and we had a conversation and I told her everything. I didn't hide one detail from her because I want her to know, like, this is what I went through and I want you to learn from what I went through. And I want you to know, like, I'm not going to hide anything from you because in turn, that's going to make her feel like she can trust me and she can come to me and tell me anything that, God forbid, she goes through, good or bad. But I think it's just so important for us to have open lines of communication with our kids because I didn't have that growing up. I love my family. They treated me great. I had a home, I had food. I never went without, but I didn't feel emotionally seen or safe in my childhood. And I think that's why I lied a lot. I snuck around a lot. I did a lot of things because I didn't want to get in trouble. Because if they know, I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm trying to break that cycle that we talked about with my daughter now. Like, you're going to tell me everything. Like, we had the sex talk already. We had the toxic relation talk already. We talk about it all. So it's like we have to be the ones to change the conversation for the future generations.
I absolutely love that you are not afraid to have those hard conversations with your daughter. I'm the same way. I have a son, and we have had all the hard conversations. We've had the drug talk, the sex talk, the pregnancy talk. The girls might try to trick you talk, and you respect girls talk. We've had them all. And without it, part of it is out of fear. I'm not going to lie. Part of it is like, I don't want you to grow up like I grew up. I don't want you to be like I was and in and out of therapy and stuff. But part of it is also just like, this shit gotta change. Like, he cannot grow up and be an adult who doesn't know how to respect people, not just people, specifically women. He can't grow up and be that young man who can't hold an intelligent conversation without his emotions getting involved. So we do it all. We talk about all of that because at the end of the day, we're raising the people who are going to be here to take care of this world when we leave. And what damn state is it going to be in if they all act like Krishan and Blueface?
I think I'm going to record a podcast just talking about that because there's just so much I could say. But I really do appreciate us being the ones who are changing. We are the change makers of our generation and generations to come. Okay, so as a listener, so you do have a nonprofit again. What are some practical ways that someone can get involved, whether it's with yours or others, for fighting the mission against DV? And what are some ways that we could get started in volunteering or even starting as a beginner who's never done that before in the world of nonprofit?
First thing I would always tell people is engage. Engage with your nonprofits. Google them, see what events they're having, attend their events, contact them if you want to volunteer. I promise you, there is something there for you to do. It may not be survivor centered. I know a lot of the times people want to volunteer and they want to work with the survivors and stuff like that, and that's a safety issue. But they may need you to make some phone calls to places to help them get funding. All of that is like a part of the machine that runs to keep services going. If you're trying to break into the nonprofit world, I would first say find out what a nonprofit is. I think people think like, oh, I'm gonna start this nonprofit and I'm going to get all this money and pay myself a salary and I'm gonna help people. I promise you it don't work like
Right.
that.
Don't believe the shit you see on Instagram, okay?
Don't believe the hype because these people on Instagram will have you thinking you're going to be a nonprofit executive director with a six-figure salary. Hell nah.
Right.
Trust me, I don't do this for the money.
Yes, you can't. If you're going into it for that reason, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Doing it from the wrong reason because, there's this narrative out now that, oh, people will make you believe that nonprofits can't make money, but they can, which is true. Nonprofits can turn a profit, but I promise you it ain't going into salaries. First, find out what a nonprofit is and make sure that is exactly what you want to do. And after you learn about nonprofits, it's in my link tree. There's a video video and slideshow that says it's very basic, but it's the beginning of starting a nonprofit. And it says, so you want to start a nonprofit. And there's also a workbook there. It's all free. Just click on it and it puts you in the mindset of, is this something I really want to do? Definitely do that. Find out if it's something you want to do. And if it is, don't try to go at it alone. If you get stuck, reach out to people. And I know how it is because I was there and I ended up having to do it alone. You reach out to people and they never get back with you. If you can't get anybody else to get back with you, send me a DM. I got you, because at the end of the day, there's room for so many organizations to pick up where other organizations are lacking. So, and our goal is to help other people. So definitely engage that way. But yeah, attend your local nonprofits events, volunteer, engage with them on social media, tell other people about them, refer clients to them, just spread the word. That's the biggest thing for nonprofits, is that exposure, so people even know they exist.
Yes, have these conversations that we're having, y'all. And again, we're going to link all of her information in the show notes, your link tree, everything, so you can contact her. So as we start to wind down this conversation, is there any final message that you would like to share with the listeners, especially for someone who's listening who may be in a similar experience or even dealing with it right now?
Actually, I have two pieces of advice. One for people experiencing domestic violence is find that space within you that is ready. Amp her ass up. Amp her up, gas her up. Remind yourself that you deserve so much more than what you're getting. And once you've amped her up and she's ready, reach out to whoever will listen. Reach out, because you can't do it alone. You need the assistance and you've got to be safe. So reach out. The other piece of advice for somebody who may be struggling with the emotions that comes along with losing someone, not just to domestic violence, but just losing someone at the hands of someone else, seek the help that you need. That's my overall message to both groups. Get help. Do not try to go at it alone. I know we call it self-work, but self-work involves support.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really what changed my life when I started speaking up and asking for help. So let go of that shame. I know it's scary. I know it's like, oh my God, what the fuck is the future going to hold? You won't know unless you start. And by starting, you need to speak up and saying, I'm not okay and I need some help. So I want to ask you a personal question. If your niece was here today, what is one thing that you would tell her?
I would definitely tell her I'm sorry for not noticing, not paying attention sooner. Definitely would tell her. I would apologize. I would just be very apologetic.
I know she's super proud of you for what you're doing and how you're honoring her legacy. So you're speaking volumes with the work that you're doing, and I know she's proud of you. So you're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast. So I want to know, what is your definition of thriving?
I feel like surviving and thriving kind of go hand in hand, because surviving is doing what it takes to live. So to me, thriving is taking that experience from surviving and applying it to your newfound freedom and using it to tackle every single day and maintain that joy after surviving. First you survive and then you thrive and do all the things.
And it can happen as someone who's experienced DV. Like, there can be a beautiful life after, and you can thrive despite what you've gone through. You've heard two completely different testimonies today, but look at us now. We are thriving regardless of the pain that we experience. And we want our listeners to know that this can be you too.
Absolutely, 100%. It will be you. You just got to speak up.
Amen. All right. So, what would you say is the most important thing you've learned about yourself and the woman you've become today as a result of the pain and trauma that you experienced in the past?
I am tougher than I thought for a very long time, especially going through like therapy. And mind you, I started therapy at an age where nobody was going to therapy. So I thought I was weak and, all of that. But going through this experience and being where I am now, I am so much tougher than I thought I was. And I also know now that no matter what comes my way, no matter what happens in life, I am fully capable of overcoming it. Like, I can do this shit. It's hard, but I can do it.
I mean, that's another definition of thriving too, right? Like, not letting the shit that life throws at you, because life is ghetto as fuck sometimes and it be lifing, but we're able to turn it around regardless of what comes our way. And I just commend you so much for being the woman that you are. I'm so proud to know you. you're leaving definitely a huge legacy in this world. So I want to know, if someone had to sit down and write about Danny, what would you want them to say? What kind of legacy do you want to leave this world?
I would want them to say that Danny fought damn hard for what she believed in. She was a giver. And I would want them to say that Danny didn't take no shit from nobody.
Yes.
Ever. Like, that's it. I fight hard. I'll give you the shirt off my back, but I ain't taking no shit. So yeah,
Yes.
those are the three things.
Yes. And she gets shit done. Okay.
That part.
Danny, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate your story. Just you as a person. You are such an incredible being. And I know so many people are going to want to know more about you, follow you. She has a podcast too, y'all. So please plug it all in on how we can get more of your amazing energy and how we can best support you and your foundation.
We'll start with the podcast. The podcast is My Survivor Voice. It's a platform for people to come on and share their stories of survival, things they've been through, and how they have found life on the other side of survival. It is at My Survivor Voice on Instagram and Threads. And then also my nonprofit is at Our 3 Inc. OUR, the number 3 INC on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. And our website is www.our3our, the number 3.org. And the best way to support us is engage with us, y'all. We are Mississippi based, so all of our events are here in Mississippi. If you are in Mississippi, reach out, follow us on social media, contact us on our website, put in a volunteer form if you want to volunteer. We are always looking for people to help out. We've got some exciting things coming. We are a part of the JLH Foundation cohort for this 2023 grant recipients for this year. And so we are gearing up for some very amazing things I can't wait to be able to share. So we're going to need all the support we can get, especially again, if you are in the Mississippi area, please reach out to us if you're looking to get involved with some things, because we are going to need you all boots on the ground. And again, if you want to know about our services, hop on the website. All of the services are there. If you need assistance, even if you are not in Mississippi and you don't know who to call in your area, we have resources. We're a part of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We can find out who in your area can assist you.
Again, we're going to leave all her info in the show notes. Show support, share this episode, get her on your podcast because she is an amazing speaker. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm so excited to continue watching you grow and flourish and continue to help other people know that you can thrive and live a beautiful life despite what you've gone through. Thank you,
I
Danny.
appreciate you so much, Leanne. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for holding this space for me. This has been amazing to be able to share and just speak to somebody like you who gets it and also is doing amazing things for people and giving people a voice. I so appreciate that. I need to see more of this in my life.
Especially people of color, okay? We're doing it so y'all can do it too, okay?
Yes, please, because y'all, we are the majority when it comes to domestic violence, but we are the minority when it comes to the resources. So let's flip that.
Yes, amen. Thank you, Danny.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leanne.